Two fake HOA enforcers showed up at Jake Morris's front yard and began chaining his flagpole, claiming it violated imaginary rules. Behind them stood Margot Ellis, a smug, self-appointed chairwoman, running a scam that had bullied elderly neighbors for years. But Jake wasn't just a retiree. His pole was a hidden FBI relay, and he had one silent call to make. Just wait until you hear how federal agents turned the tables and made justice fly higher than ever. It was a calm Thursday morning in the Virginia suburbs, the kind of still golden hour where even the birds hadn't fully woken up. Jake Morris, a retired systems analyst with a fondness for routine, had just finished grinding his coffee beans when he heard a sound that didn't belong, the harsh clank of metal on metal, followed by muffled shouting. He set the mug down and stepped out onto his porch, barefoot, still in his flannel pajama pants. What he saw stopped him cold. Two men, strangers, stood in his front yard beside his flagpole, dragging heavy chains and an industrial-grade ratchet strap from the bed of an unmarked white pickup. Both wore navy blue polos with a stitched patch that read HOA enforcement in crooked gold thread. One of them, a thick-set man with mirrored sunglasses and a clipboard, gave the pole a quick kick, like he was sizing it up for demolition. The other was already looping chains around the base. "Hey!" Jake's voice cut the air louder than he expected. "What do you think you're doing?" The guy with the clipboard didn't even turn around. Per HOA Regulation 3.2, unauthorized structures above 12 feet in front-facing lots must be removed. This one's non-compliant. You were sent multiple notices. Jake stepped off the porch slowly. "There is no HOA, not since 2019. I was on the committee when it dissolved." That finally earned him a glance, but not a respectful one. The man sneered. "We're the enforcement branch of the re-established board. You've been informed. This is your final warning." Jake's eyes narrowed. His mind moved quickly, cataloging not just the absurdity of the situation, but the legal and technical implications. There was no official HOA. The neighborhood disbanded it after a court fight 6 years ago, when overreach and budget misuse forced its dissolution. But even after the ruling, a cluster of power-hungry residents, led by Margot Ellis, retired realtor, self-styled neighborhood savior, continued acting like they were still in charge. Most neighbors ignored the new HOA threats, emails that looked like official notices, but came from a Gmail account. Jake had laughed them off too, until now. Now, they weren't just playing dress-up. They'd escalated to showing up in costume with tools and intimidation. And worse, they picked that flagpole. Jake turned his gaze upward. The pole stood 16 feet tall, stainless steel, anchored 3 feet deep in concrete. It wasn't just decorative. It had been precisely engineered, carefully installed, and purposefully placed, not by chance, but through a partnership few people in the neighborhood even knew existed. Near the top, nearly invisible, unless you knew to look for it, was a matte black dome the size of a soda can. To most, it looked like a cheap weatherproof cap, but it wasn't. It was part of a federal relay node, an encrypted uplink built into a nationwide infrastructure pilot launched in 2022. Jake hadn't just volunteered his property for the test. He'd helped design the technology. He looked back at the men, now tightening the chains. Something tightened in his chest. Not fear, not even anger. Something older, colder. "You've got 5 seconds," Jake said, his voice low and even, "to unhook that and leave." This time both men turned to look at him, slowly, measuring him. The big one smiled, condescending. "You can file a complaint with the board, but this pole's coming down today." Jake took a step back toward his garage, not breaking eye contact. "No," he said, "it's not." And inside, past his mower and workbench, beneath a locked drawer labeled Tools Network, sat a satellite phone hardwired to a government ops channel. Jake hadn't touched it in months. But this morning, it was time. Jake didn't call the local sheriff's office. He didn't pull out his phone and film. He didn't shout or posture. He simply walked back into the garage with slow, deliberate steps, unbothered by the growing noise outside. While the men out front grunted and argued over the tension on the ratchet strap, Jake pulled open the old steel drawer under his workbench. Inside was a satellite phone encased in foam. No screen cracks, no dust. Speed dial 4 still lit green. He pressed it once. No words, just a tone, followed by a coded click. Then silence. He slid the drawer closed, leaned against the workbench, and exhaled once, calm and measured. Then he waited. 20 minutes passed. Just enough time for the storm to grow. From down the cul-de-sac came the unmistakable rhythm of expensive heels on pavement. Margot Ellis had arrived. She came walking up the driveway like she owned it, her oversized sunglasses perched atop a sculpted head of blonde curls, and a fresh HOA nameplate pinned to a navy blue blazer like it meant something. Her whole presence radiated theater, a woman too used to getting her way and far too confident that she always would. "Jake," she cooed, her voice as sweet as vinegar, "we've been more than patient with you. That pole is not only unsanctioned, it's a safety hazard. It's an eyesore. It violates the harmony of the block." Jake didn't move, just watched her from the doorway. Margot gestured toward the chain-wrapped base like it was a public service. "You were warned, remember? Multiple times. We even gave you an extension after Christmas, but you refused to comply. You forced our hand." Jake stepped down from the threshold, unhurried. "You want to take it down that badly?" he said quietly. "Then I won't stop you, but don't come crying when the feds arrive." That made her laugh. Not politely, loudly, the kind of mocking laugh people use when they think they've already won. "Oh, Jake," she grinned, hands on her hips. "You think you're intimidating? You're a retired desk jockey with too much time and too many lawn ornaments. You've got a weather pole with an American flag, and now you think you're some kind of federal outpost?" Jake didn't blink, didn't correct her. He simply looked at her like a man watching a match fall into dry brush. Then he turned and walked back inside his house without another word. And just like that, the mood shifted. It began with a whisper of tires, barely audible, rolling up the hill toward the cul-de-sac. Then a black SUV turned the corner, windows tinted so dark it swallowed the sunlight. It stopped. Then a second followed. Then a third, slower and more deliberate. No sirens, no barking orders, just presence. The fake enforcers stopped turning the crank mid-ratchet, tools in hand. One of them squinted at the SUVs, trying to make out the insignia on the plates. Margot, mid-pose by the flower beds, froze. Then the car doors opened. 4 men stepped out in plain tactical gear, muted windbreakers over reinforced vests, nothing flashy. Each one held a badge up to eye level, slow and unmistakable. One of them, tall and calm, walked toward the flagpole and addressed the crew. "Put down the chains," he said clearly. "Step away from federal property." The yard went silent. Margot's tan drained a shade paler. Her voice, once smug and commanding, caught in her throat. Jake, watching through the front blinds, didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply sipped his coffee. The game was no longer in his hands. It was in theirs. The silence didn't last. Margot's voice cracked the air like glass under pressure. "This is private land. That flagpole is on his front lawn. He's bluffing. There's no way that's federal. He's not even in the military." She was shouting not at the agents, but at the sky. Desperate now. The composure she'd strutted in with just minutes ago had vanished. All that remained was a woman, cornered, loudly trying to reassert control she no longer had. The lead agent, calm and precise, reached into a side pouch and pulled out a plastic sleeve. Inside was a laminated sheet, government seal stamped in gold across the top, crisp and official. He held it out, not aggressively, just enough to leave no doubt. "Pursuant to Title 18, U.S. Code Section 1362, he said, his voice even, "tampering with federal communications infrastructure is a criminal offense. That includes any attempt to remove, damage, or disable equipment tied to national emergency operations." He let the silence land before continuing. "This pole houses a protected FBI data relay node. You didn't just mess with private property. You interfered with an active communications channel used in ongoing intelligence work." Margot took a step back like she'd been physically struck. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Behind her, the two fake enforcers froze mid-step. Then one of them, a younger guy with thinning hair and nerves clearly unraveling, bolted. No warning, no shout. He dropped the chain and sprinted full speed down the sidewalk. The second SUV's rear door swung open, and a plainclothes agent stepped out of the parked utility van at the corner. He didn't yell. He didn't chase. He simply moved with intent, intercepting the man halfway down the block with a precise takedown that ended with both on the grass. No drama, no excessive force. Just training. Back at the pole, the bigger enforcer stood paralyzed, hands slightly raised, eyes wide. Jake watched from his porch, arms folded across his chest. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't smirking. In fact, he looked disappointed. Not surprised, not vindicated, just weary. This wasn't a game to him. It never had been. Margot stumbled backward a few steps, breathing hard, her polished facade crumbling by the second. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. Then she dropped it. It clattered across the concrete, screen flashing with a missed call. "I didn't know," she gasped, voice shaky. "Nobody told me anything about that tower. I thought it was just decorative, maybe Wi-Fi or something. This is a huge misunderstanding." The agent didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply delivered the facts like someone who'd done this 100 times. "Ma'am, you created a false homeowners association. You issued fake citations. You hired unlicensed personnel to carry out unauthorized enforcement actions. And you attempted to dismantle a federal relay system that is shielded under classified jurisdiction." He paused just long enough for her to feel the weight of it. "We'll let the U.S. Attorney decide what qualifies as a misunderstanding." Two agents stepped forward. One gently took Margot's wrist, while the other retrieved a zippered pouch. No drama, no noise. They didn't slam her arms or drag her across the lawn. She was placed in restraints, professionally, efficiently, without spectacle. And that was what made it worse. To someone like Margot, humiliation in silence stung far more than any public scene. Jake stood still, watching it all unfold beneath the flag that still fluttered quietly above. The same flag she had tried to tear down. By the end of the weekend, the neighborhood had transformed from quiet suburbia into a hotbed of whispered conversations and cautious glances. People leaned over fences, spoke in hushed tones during dog walks, and checked their mailboxes twice. Not for letters, but for peace of mind, because within 72 hours, the truth came out. The FBI moved quickly and thoroughly. Agents interviewed residents door to door, each meeting calm and professional, but surgical. They confiscated a stack of HOA violation notices Margot had printed herself, using old letterheads and copy shop seals. She had been collecting monthly compliance dues from nearly 24 homes, mostly from elderly residents who didn't have the energy to push back. In some cases, she'd even mailed out phony lien threats, warning of property seizures for non-payment. None of it was legal. All of it was documented. The two men she'd hired, self-titled HOA enforcers, were unlicensed, uninsured, and had no authority of any kind. One had a minor criminal record. The other was an out-of-work security guard who'd responded to a Craigslist ad titled "Community Protection Needed Cash Daily." Now, both were facing federal charges for impersonating government officials. And Margot? She was charged with wire fraud, falsifying legal documents, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to defraud multiple individuals across state lines. Her house was searched, her accounts frozen, her name, the name she once used to sign off every fake notice with a flourish of superiority, was now attached to an indictment with a DOJ case number. The cul-de-sac was quiet again, but this time the silence was different. It wasn't the calm before a storm. It was the relief that follows one. Jake stayed mostly indoors that week, watering his tomato beds in the early hours, nodding politely to neighbors who now seemed to look at him with something deeper than gratitude. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was relief. Or maybe it was the realization that the man with the flagpole knew more than he ever let on. 3 days after the incident, a black government sedan pulled into his driveway. No SUVs, no spectacle. Just one vehicle and one woman in a crisp, dark suit. Mid-to-mid 50s, firm posture, bureau badge clipped to her lapel. She didn't knock. She waited until Jake stepped out onto the porch. Mr. Morris, she greeted with a professional smile. Thank you for your discretion. You never disclosed your prior clearance status during the incident. That's rare. Jake offered a simple nod. They never asked. She chuckled lightly. Well, it saved us a lot of trouble. The Bureau appreciates your continued cooperation. We'll be upgrading your unit, switching to Phase 2 relay protocols. Expect a new tower installed in 3 weeks. Jake didn't say much. He just nodded again and offered her a seat. She politely declined, left him with a card, and drove off without fanfare. Later that evening he sat on the porch, sipping coffee from the same mug he'd held the morning it all began. The flag above him fluttered slightly in the late summer breeze, still pristine, still high. Only now it stood a little straighter. The base had been reinforced, and someone had quietly replaced the dome on top with a newer, more advanced unit. No one from the street would notice. But Jake did. Across the neighborhood, yards were a little tidier. Mailboxes didn't carry threats anymore. And Margot's house? Vacant. Her name erased from the community email list. Her power unplugged. Jake leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly, and watched the sun dip beneath the horizon. The pole stood tall, the flag flew free, and this time no one dared touch it.